Thanks, Program Director. As you're introducing me, I was beginning to think that you're talking about somebody I don't know. Tembeka said, I must not tell you that she's a bully. So I'm defying her and telling you that she's a bully. But also, she asked me to speak about the future of finance. Now, that would be a very intimidating endeavor in front of finance people who know finance better than I can ever hope to do. So, hopefully whatever freestyling I'm gonna do is gonna make sense to you. First, even though it's a day late, Happy Women's Month. The profession I represent, the accounting profession, is responsible for the origin of banking. Many, many years ago in the European countries, but also it's responsible for a lot of development that we see in this world. But in that history, there is something to be said about the role of women. As an organized profession, it started around about 1880 in the UK when the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales was established. In 1891, a pioneering woman by the name of Mary Harris Smith started a practice in the UK providing accounting services to clients. And she applied to be a member of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. And she was rejected. In 1895, so she started applying in 1891. 1895, the then president of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, Charles Fitch Kemp, made the statement that if a woman were to become a chartered accountant, he would rather resign or kill himself. So with the discovery of gold in the country in 1886 and the investment from Europe marked the origins of the profession in South Africa in 1894. And next year, we're going to be 130 years old in the country. SAICA is only about 42 years old, 43 years old, because the 4 societies from the 4 provinces that were in the country after the Union of South Africa in 1910 came together ultimately in 1980 and established the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, which I head. It took 23 years, from 1894 to 1917, for the first woman chartered accountant to qualify. And we had the first woman chartered accountant in South Africa. The UK only had Miss Harris Smith only in 1920, after a legislation was passed in the UK that banned segregation on the basis of sex in 1919. So women, even though, as Cohen was saying, play a critical role in society, and pretty much most of the success we know today There's something that about the invention of the internet and the invention of the fiber optic cables that now we're talking data, we're talking connectivity, and those were inventions by women. We don't hear much about who invented those. Our profession, especially in South Africa, is not representative of its population. The economic active population in South Africa is such that only 10% of the economic active population is white and 90% is African, colored, and Indian. And yet, only 17% of our members are chartered accountants are African, colored, and Indian. There's a disconnect. It's a disconnect that I think on the latter part of what I want to talk about, which is about doing something to change the situation around where you are here in Standard Bank, in society, in the areas where you participate in social and economic activity. And I'll talk to that a bit later. But the transformation of the profession also globally had to happen because it so happens that there's been a lot of injustices in the world. The Holocaust, apartheid in South Africa, racial segregation in the US. And yet in the past 5-10 years, as the forces of evil and regression, that is very conservative politicians like Trump and others in Europe, emerge and gain traction, even in North America and Canada. The narrative that plays itself loud is a narrative that seeks to persuade us who are black and African that even though we were oppressed, we gained something out of oppression. Florida in the US is very, very popular with DeSantis being the governor there. But you don't hear the same narrative that says the Jews benefited something from Holocaust. So the point is that as these narratives play themselves out, we ought to be conscious that when we embark on the journey for transformation, we need to be very, very sensitive to those that had been deprived. But we are not powerless victims. We're the masters of our destiny. And that means then the change we seek is the change we must strive for. The change we want to see is the change we must inspire and drive. You all want to be leaders of this organization in the notion of leadership that is understood and well accepted, where a position like I'm the CEO, therefore people would say I'm the leader of SAICA. I want to differ. I want to differ that whether I lead SAICA or not must be judged on the basis of what I do. Therefore, there's just 5 propositions that I want to make about the notion of leadership. And hopefully, by making these 5 propositions, I will help you see your journey to making a difference in the area in which you work, in your family, and in your community. And it is this, that leadership is independent of a position. Leadership is independent of a position. It is what we do. We do it some of the time, and we seldom do it most of the time. And the reason we do it only some of the time and we don't do it most of the time is that it is difficult and it is dangerous. So the second proposition is that you can exercise leadership in any position that you occupy. From any position that you occupy. Because all of us have aspirations. All of us have aspirations for ourselves, for our families, or for the organization we work for. And those aspirations versus the reality we face today do not align. There's a gap. That gap, if you've ever wondered when to exercise leadership, that gap is the indicator of a leadership gap. When we talk in this country about the electricity problems, we always talk about that in the context of wanting our economy to grow, wanting to make a difference so that we can provide better for our society. And we all know that's what we wish to see. Stable, reliable electricity supply. And that's not our reality. Who do you think is going to solve that problem? It's not going to be solved by government. They've been at it for 15 years, and they don't seem to be able to figure out what to do to solve it. But probably the problem is deeper than that, and I will probably blend this later into this, so I don't want to get distracted by focusing on just this issue. So the third proposition is that opportunities to exercise leadership visit us daily. When we see that gap, between what we aspire to and the current reality, that is an opportunity to exercise leadership. And we always hold back, because it is both difficult and dangerous. Why is it difficult and dangerous? The kinds of problems you deal with when you lead. So there's a lot of things that we do in the course of running an organization. We put a strategy, we put a vision together, we pull a team that is going to work to drive that. We come up with the rules, the governance processes, and all of those things. Those things say nothing about leadership, but everything about the order we need to create to run a successful organization. But it's got nothing to do with leadership. If it did, it would be great. So, but there are problems that we face as a society that seem never to go away. Fraud and corruption, poverty, electricity supply in our case. We've been having load shedding since 2008. We had a semblance at some point that it was being resolved, we don't know what they were doing. But while they were solving that, it looks like they were dealing with other issues on the side that were self-enriching. So, but some of the problems, you try the solution today, it comes back tomorrow. You try again, it comes back tomorrow. Logic is not delivering the required answer. So when logic is not the answer, you then need leadership. You then need a process of mobilizing people to face their problems, to engage with their problems, to face their demons, their culture, their behavior, their loyalties, which all of these things are the reason why progress is not being made. So, that becomes a difficult thing to tell somebody that for so many years you've always believed you are this individual. But this individual is the reason we have all of these problems. That's a difficult thing. And people are not going to clap when you tell them that. But also, we also have our own loyalties. Therefore, if I've got loyalty towards Thembeka, I'm going to say, but Thembeka always speaks nicely to me. So why would I go out of my limb today and tell her that she's messing up? So that's what makes it difficult. But the other element is that when you lead, you change the order of things, either in society or in that organization. When you change the order of things, so-and-so was the go-to person, and all of a sudden, this other individual is the one that is the go-to person. He drives the change that makes sense. So, when you change the order of things, the people will start pushing back. If you close the gaps in corruption, those that benefit today, what will they do? They'll shoot you. Papita Deokaran, may her soul rest in peace, is gone. The professor in the University of Limpopo is gone. And there's a few others who died. So you get killed. Or if you work in an organization, think about a colleague that you've had before, either here or wherever you worked before, who you believed this guy is going to go places. Are they still employed in that organization? Are they still here? Can you think about that person? You don't have to answer me. So when you begin to challenge things, even though even in corporate South Africa we believe that we want to make money, and therefore somebody who comes with ideas to make money will always prosper. It doesn't always work that way. So it is difficult and dangerous, and therefore people decide to pull back instead of standing out. Cohen said, you must fit in, but also you must stand out. So it is the standing out that tends to be a problem. So opportunities to exercise leadership visit us every day, but because it's difficult and also it's dangerous, we seldom stick our neck out. There's a way to do it. Fourth proposition is that leadership is episodal. Nobody exercises leadership Monday to Friday. You do it some of the time and we don't do it most of the time. It's episodal. So you never expect somebody to always be in that zone. And it's, by the way, some friends of mine from Australia wrote a book, Provocation as Leadership. Maxime Fenn and Michael Johnston published it in December last year. When you begin to challenge the status quo, you begin to help people face the issues that make progress difficult. So it's episodal and it can be learned is the last proposition. You can learn how to lead. As long as you identify that gap between the aspiration and the current reality and take steps to resolve, to close that gap. Now, you can't do it alone. You can't do it alone. If you try and do it alone, you'll be isolated and you'll be taken out. So there are ways in which you can do it. And in order to understand that dynamic, so I'm saying to you as a proposition, all of the daily things that you do, don't classify them as leadership. They are essential. This bank will not prosper without those things. But there are things that will take this bank to another level that have been tried and failed. They talked about Funeka as being resilient. It took 10 years for the strategy she was implementing to bear fruit. Which, by the way, as a digression, leads me to another point. I see some of you are still in the early stages of their career. I'm not going to say young. Still ages of their careers. And the impatience is always going to be there. I want to get to the top. Obviously, if you run too fast, you might stumble and fall. But the most important thing is, don't lose your aspiration. Just know that it takes time sometimes for change to happen. Change is incremental in time, says Marty Linsky, a friend of mine, but radical over time. If you look today where you were yesterday, you don't see much difference. If you take stock again tomorrow where you were today, it doesn't make a big difference. If you take stock the after tomorrow, it doesn't make a difference. But if you look where you were beginning of the month, where you were beginning of the year, you begin to see something noticeable. It's incremental in time, but radical over change. That's why when you lead, you need resilience. That's why when you lead, you need the staying power. And you're not going to have the staying power unless there is a purpose you are driving. And it is that purpose that will keep you going for a long time. So I'm saying it's difficult and dangerous, but I'm saying it's essential. So I'm not going to leave you worried about the dangers. I'm going to help you figure out what the dangers are and how do you get to deal with the dangers. First, there's something we call marginalization. Marginalization takes the form of, and one of the presidents of this country was a master at doing this thing. You've got a minister, and the minister has got a portfolio, whatever it's held, whatever that portfolio is. And then all of a sudden they set up a task team of other ministers around that minister. So think about it in a corporate environment. You're working, driving a project, and all of a sudden somebody's volunteered to come and work with you. So you may have been needing resources, support, so that somebody gets volunteered, and that person that gets volunteered is not going to be loyal to you only. Okay? Let's not attack people's integrity. It's not going to be loyal to you only. Can you imagine Tembeka sends somebody to work with you, and then all of a sudden Tembeka has a cup of coffee with this person just to check in. How are things going? Yeah? And when she checks in, do you think that person is going to manage the information she shares with you? So all of a sudden, the project you were driving, managing the dynamics of the project, the way you see fit, and Tembeka on the other side is worried that I don't have line of sight in this project. Now she has line of sight. So when you get that kind of support, I'm not suggesting that at all times it's sinister. But ask yourself a question: have I been raising difficult questions? Because if you've been raising difficult questions, then that is the signal of the danger that's coming your way. Second one is diversion. As a young fellow, I always wanted to be challenged. If I get given more work, I'm at home because I want to get experience. Which is a natural thing, and it's not a bad thing. But if you are raising difficult questions, and as a boss, I give you a lot of work, I'm keeping you busy so that you don't have time to think about. You get that? So again, if you find yourself in that space where you're in basket, there's a trip to London, Tembeka go to London, and then a meeting takes place while you are gone, decision gets made. You've got to fit in thereafter. You get that? So that's the second point that comes as an indicator. Third point that comes as an indicator is personal attack. If you raise issues that have got to do with women, and they all fold their arms, you go on and on and on and on, and then they go at you on that basis. So you need to be careful about how you raise issues, if you need to raise issues as well. And the last one is seduction. It's exactly what it means. You know, all of us like, you're such a great leader. You know, I like the way you do things. So people will heap praises on you so that you find it offensive to challenge them on the things they are saying or doing. And that is seduction. So these are 4 things that indicate the dangers of leading. But then what do you do? How do you then, you've identified the aspiration, you've identified the current reality, there's a gap, you want to drive this. I said don't do it alone. In fact, if you find yourself contributing far too much into an endeavor than others, and it's about a difficult situation that the organization is facing, you probably have already dug your grave. So do not do it alone. You have to build a certain set of relationships around the organization. The first set of relationships is the people that agree with you. Make sure you know who is the person that is on your side. Because if the issue you are dealing with is not at the right level of ripeness, in other words, people are not ready to face that reality, work with others. So know the people that agree with you, but also know the people that disagree with you. How many of you do lunch, dinner, coffee with the person that you think hates the hell out of you at work? How many? Can you raise your hands? Okay, there's one. So if you take me out for lunch and we are always in agreement, you are wasting your money. If you are dealing with a difficult problem in an organization, you're wasting your money. I already agree with you. You need the person who's going to shoot your project down. You need to sit down with that person. You need to engage that person. You need to understand why are they opposed to your idea from their perspective, not your perspective. And you can only do that by staying close to them, understanding them, and taking them out, getting them this and that. The third relationship you need to build is a relationship with contrarians. Contrarians, you've got that person in an organization, in a group, in a division, that nobody wants that person to speak because it's going to upset everyone. So when that person speaks, everybody goes. When I joined State Information Technology Agency, it's the IT department of government. to simplify its purpose. I had 3,300 employees. So I needed to turn the organization around very, very quickly. I had a very short space of time. So I had a road show around the country, went to the Western Cape. When I got to the Western Cape, so I talk. After finishing talking, I allow for questions to be raised. This fellow was sitting in the front where Tembeka is sitting and raises his hand. So I pointed at him. As he stood up, everybody said, "Sit!" So everybody wanted him to sit down, and obviously sat down. And I then allowed this to play out because I already knew these things about leadership. So I knew exactly what was happening. So I just wanted to see how much, if I cooperate with them, this will go. And of course, the person only got an opportunity to speak at the end. Guess who was the most sensible person of them all? That person, they wanted that he must sit down. So the reason the person must be marginalized is because the person always raises the uncomfortable truths. So that's the third relationship with contrarians. Fourth relationship is with the authority, your boss. Your boss will support what you're doing, but at some point you'll find the boss having a cold feet. He's lukewarm, or she's lukewarm. You start saying, this person doesn't have a backbone. No. It's not that that person doesn't have a backbone. There's other forces in the organization that are pushing back on this initiative. So he's feeling the heat, or she's feeling the heat, and therefore doesn't want to say to you stop, but would rather just delay you a little bit. So if you stay close to that person might just be open enough to say, listen, I like your project, but the political situation in the environment is not helpful at the moment. So that relationship is important. The fifth relationship is relationship with the people that are likely to lose if your initiative succeeds. Understand? People who are likely to lose if your initiative succeeds. This group is the most group that will push back. And probably your boss was pushing back because those people were pushing back. Now, if you're sitting in a meeting and you're having a conversation, people are pushing back on your idea. They represent sometimes people outside of the room who are going to lose. So they see this, they agree with it, they can see where it's going. One of the things that we lie about in this world is that people are afraid of change. Nobody's afraid of change. If you win 100 million rands lotto here, would you not appreciate that? Exactly. So we do want change, but it's the nature of the change that results in a loss that makes us push back. The loss could be just out of thing, it could just be prominence. I was the go-to person, and now all of a sudden, there's this young woman, Tembeka, who the people speak to, not me. Okay? So, that is an issue that you need to be mindful of. The people that are going to lose are going to be the one who push back the most. So you build that relationship. And lastly, it's a relationship with yourself. Eat healthy, exercise. Avoid doing things that are going to compromise you. You see her, she's beautiful and so on. She is somebody else's wife. Just leave her alone. Or somebody else's husband, leave him alone. So, because if you give people the ammunition, they will shoot you. I have experienced that piece many, many times. Not that I've... but it's the shooting that... it's being shot that I'm talking about that I've experienced many, many times. So if you build these relationships, it helps you to find a way to navigate. If you are not the right messenger, if you are not the right deliverer of the message, you can get people to deliver. Now, I'm saying these things because I started by saying that the change in our profession happened a lot because women played a very important role. 1956, in the UK, in one company, people voted to admit this young fellow from Jamaica, Lancelot Reynolds. And all the men in that company voted against Lancelot being appointed. All the women voted for his appointment, and he was a black person. And then the complexion of the profession began to change. The work we do today to drive change in our profession, the work you are supposed to do to contribute towards that change as accountants as well, but also the work you're supposed to do to drive the change in this organization is very important. And I think the complexion and the nature and the character of our profession will be better off with yourselves. Will be better off with the work that you have already been doing and you are better placed to do. If all presidents in all countries were women, there will be no war. Hence, I'm saying the future of our profession is better off because you are part of the profession. It's better off because you are part of the profession. And I hope it all makes sense. Thank you.